Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Roundtable. I'm here in San Francisco, and we'll be going over all of the roster changes that have been going on. We're fully into the off-season at this point. I'm joined as usual by Spellsy.
Hello.
And still in Sydney, Australia, at least for one more week, Travis Gafford. Travis, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Hunter.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think the biggest story in the last week, we'll toot our own horn a little, is something, Travis, that you and Do Raven have been working on for a while, which is major changes to the Korean scene, the way they're going to structure teams, the way they'll structure their season, everything. Take us through the changes there, Travis, and what really stood out to you in all of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we might have a little bit of roughness on the connection here, but hopefully you guys can hear me. The big thing is that there's just dramatic changes happening in Korea. This is because of OGN, Kespa, and Riot Korea working together. They felt like there were many flaws in the Korean ecosystem, ones that admittedly the West didn't ever seem to notice or really believe in because everybody's been so obsessed with the way they were doing business before. But what we're going to see is probably like a move towards. I mean, basically, I shouldn't say this is what we're seeing because all they've done so far is put out proposals for the community and the public and create a comment on. But it looks like the way that they're going is very similar to what the rumors we've been hearing. One team rule system, a situation where we sort of see more of a league type system. OGN winter canceled, which is something that Nilu and I reported on a couple months ago. So pretty much everything that the rumors have, the rumor mill has been discussing. So we'd see something much more similar to what the West has and the LPL has. I mean, this has been pretty controversial. Lots of people saying that this is a good thing. Lots of people saying it's a bad thing. I think the very funny thing about it is that Riot is very often criticized for taking the side of the spectator, and people are like, oh, you're more interested in the spectacle than actually competitive integrity and that kind of thing. But then in this situation, so many people are complaining about how maybe it's better for the players, but it won't be as entertaining. So I don't know, it's just kind of funny to see how everyone's been reacting to the news.
Yeah, it's been pretty big news, and it's kind of signaling a greater shift in the Korean scene after they've won Worlds again, and then now we're seeing this big landslide or big game changer with only one team, so that there's a big question mark on what the sister team players are going to do, even successful sister teams like Samsung White and Samsung Blue, and going to 8 teams instead of 16 teams, and a league system instead of a tournament system. There's going to be, I think, one of the very large repercussions of this.
Yeah, and I think the question is, does this damage the significant infrastructure advantage that we've sort of credited Korea with having and credited partial or a lot of their success to? Travis, I think you've been very vocal on Twitter that this isn't Riot NA kind of enforcing their viewpoint on Riot Korea. Do you want to speak a little more to that? Why should we not assume that Riot NA just put the hammer down on regions and is sort of enforcing globally their kind of doctrinal view of how League of Legends should be run?
I mean, first off, it's especially, whenever you go over there and you see how all this stuff is run, it's very clear that this is all kind of this interesting balance of power between Kespa and OGN and Riot Korea. I don't even think that if Riot NA wanted to, they could just come in with a bludgeon and force Kespa to do whatever they want. Especially, I think I would imagine Kespa probably feels pretty bold after what happened with Blizzard, sort of a like, hey, if you don't listen to us or you don't listen to us or you just try to like force your way into the situation, look what happens with StarCraft 2. So I don't think that they even have really the power to do something like that. Also, this is just, it's very, I mean, not only has Riot NA and Riot Korea gone to great lengths to explain to the public that this is not something where Riot NA is enforcing stuff, but it even goes into or plays into just like the basic philosophy of Riot Games whenever they are working in specific regions. I talked a little bit about this on Reddit yesterday, and then I think the comment I was discussing it on got super downvoted or something. But Riot over time has moved very much towards this like independent region sort of thing where all of their, like Riot Brazil, Riot Turkey, the Dublin office for Western Europe, and very specifically Riot Korea, these guys are all in charge of their own regions, and they specialize in that. It's not something where the central office comes in and just starts meddling with the very specific things there. So I can say with a great deal of confidence that, well, I'm sure Riot Korea and Riot NA talks. There's not a situation where you have like Nick Allen and the team being like, hey, we're going to get rid of OGN champions and change all this stuff.
So at the end of the day, there are tons of changes, but Spellsy, is Korea a stronger region after these kinds of changes? Is this for the betterment of that region as a whole?
I mean, it's tough to say. The reserve league will really be like where we'll see if the changes are successful or not. Like if that league maintains competitiveness and it's actually like a thing to be in, then I think it could maybe help promote. I mean, in OGN, and there's actually a genuine flaw in the old OGN thing where group stages often were discounted. A lot of people were saying that group stages didn't really matter, that they were always like good teams against bad teams. Like people probably a year ago at this time were making arguments that there was only 8 good teams or something like that.
Right.
Now we've seen more and more good teams. I think the biggest change will be the sister teams. We'll see if this actually handicaps them in terms of infrastructure.
Right. I think traditional sports have shown there's an interesting balance that you have to stretch where you expand a certain amount, both for market and, like to make sure you have enough role for all the talented players you have. But if you expand too far, you can kind of water down the overall quality of the league. There certainly have been arguments that OGN had kind of expanded too far and the average team was a little bit more watered down. But I do think one big difference is the Challenger Series, as we see in EU and NA, is kind of an afterthought, both for fans and in terms of a talent pool, and nobody's really sticking there. If OGN is able to have their kind of minor league, or I forget exactly what they call it, be a real thing, Travis, I would expect that you can keep the farm kind of feeder system continuing to bring up talent in a way that we haven't really seen a great example of so far in NA and EU.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The reserve thing was new to me. I mean, I had chased with Nilu a lot of these different rumors, and everything was one of the problems for us was that it was very hard to report on because even during Worlds, like everything was shifting. These discussions were still ongoing, and as I even said, like these things still could get changed because they're just proposals. But the reserve thing was something that must have come up pretty late in the game because I just hadn't had a chance to hear it, or maybe it just wasn't that big of a deal. And it seems to be a little bit different than the way we run like the Challenger stuff and trying to keep excess talent around in the West. So I'm quite fascinated by it. It's obviously an answer to like how do we how can we figure out how to sort of deal with what's left after the 2-team rule has changed. It's been very fascinating to me to see the community's take on the 2-team rule change because so many people were like, oh, I still think this is a bad idea for Korea. Like how, they shouldn't have changed from this 2-team thing. Korean fans will hate me for saying this, or not like Korean regional fans, but fans of the Korean scene in the West will hate me for saying this, but you know what? We aren't allowed to have 2 teams in North America and Europe, while Korea was. And almost certainly the ability for Samsung White to play against Samsung Blue all the time was a contributing factor to their success. It was very strange to me to see people just be like, oh yeah, Korea should be allowed to continue to have these sister teams, while every other region isn't. And so I'm kind of happy with the change, even though, yes, I know it's very disruptive. But I'm kind of surprised there wasn't more of an outcry for this kind of balance. I think almost like there's this thing where like Korean fans in the West want Korea to continue to be this dominant thing, even if there's like this kind of strange disadvantage that they have. I don't know. It's just been very interesting to me.
I mean, I think the biggest thing about the sister teams is why not just, if it's an unfair advantage or whatever, why not just bring it in the West? Like, what's wrong with having sister teams in the West?
Yeah,
allowing that.
I mean, I think Riot sees the collusion in the Riot NA at least has seen the sort of fear of collusion as not worth it. I'm also not. I think it would have been, given how young the scene was in NA and EU, the rich just getting richer and sort of lessen the diversity, because your big teams would have just had 2 teams, and then you had 4 organizations total in NA, or maybe 5, and TSM and CLG each have 2 teams, and then you will really lose sort of strategic and kind of a level of diversity among your stars and players and figures in the scene and all of that. So I think for a scene that was as young as the NA and EU scenes were, it probably would have been a mistake to allow the big brands to have multiple teams and just roll onward. But it does sound like, Travis, from your perspective then, Korea maybe is getting weaker because they're losing, in your mind and maybe in lots of people's minds, a distinct advantage they had when competing on the international level.
Yeah, I think that what we will see is a weaker Korea, and it'll be interesting to see how people react to that. But I think that this is not going to help Korea. It certainly won't help Korea on the international stage. However, I think it will help the ecosystem in Korea as a whole. I think it'll bring them back into line with where everybody else is. Because I actually think that perhaps one of the reasons why they've always had, we talked about this before, and there's like, why is it that Korea always just brings this team out that's like way better than anyone else? I think that the Korean scene sort of has this thing where like you sacrifice the strength of everyone to power up like 1 or 2 specific teams, by sending them into these tournaments where they're better than everybody else, so they get to play for longer, and so you just sort of like supercharge these guys at the cost of the rest of your team and the ecosystem. So I think what we'll see is a stronger system overall, and certainly, I mean, people have been talking about this for a while. It's a little bit of a secret, or like a not so hidden secret, was the fact that like Korean players were getting paid pennies, which is why I think we're starting to see this talent drain out of the region. So hopefully also this like minimum salary thing and making it so that these organizations have to compete a little bit more with each other. Samsung can't just buy them all the best players, and like there's a little bit more of that. Hopefully we'll see just a better system for the players overall.
Yeah. All right, well, let's stick with that Korean talent drain, because that's going to be a big theme as we go over the rest of the roster rumors. The big one, the rumor that kind of came out today in a Daily Dot piece is Dade going to China to play, and maybe having talked to Cloud9 about a potential spot there. That's obviously one of the stars from Worlds, and one of the kind of Worlds caliber top 20 players. I forget where he was in their rankings, but kind of a significant player, flirting with other regions, and definitely leaving Korea, continuing a trend of Korean players leaving, going back, as we saw in Royal Club with Insec and others moving over earlier this year. I don't know, Travis, what you think about that particular move, but this is something where we're seeing, at least according to that report, China paying a significant amount to get a Korean player bringing over, and really setting a new sort of salary level for international play. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll see that a lot more?
Yeah, China, this follows rumors we've been chasing and information we've known that basically right now it does feel as though if a Korean player is open. So first off, yes, like we've seen, I tweeted a couple days ago, like right now it's like buy 1 Korean, get 1 free. There's basically a fire sale on Koreans as we're seeing these guys leave the 2-team system, and as, again, Koreans become more and more aware of just how much money you can get on the international, in other regions, international regions. And I think, and along those lines, we've also been hearing strong, like just time and time again, China has so much money to spend and will just consistently outbid North American, and then behind North America, European teams on these Korean players if they want them, which is actually kind of interesting. I almost wonder how inflated, it seems as though like the Chinese teams are going to get more and more. Salaries are going to get more and more inflated, and as an American, like we're very familiar with incredibly inflated athlete salaries. So it'll be really interesting. I would caution everybody. I did hear that Dade would probably be moving to China, but I would caution everybody to remember that in terms of the Cloud9 thing, there was really no specifics on what kind of conversations he was having with Cloud9, and so a lot of people were thinking, oh, he would replace Hai. Or maybe Hai would move to Sport, Lemon would retire. Like there's really no way of knowing at this point. So yeah, I would just caution people from jumping to conclusions on exactly what that was going to be.
Yeah, but let's jump to conclusions a little, since
Okay.
it's the topic. Let's say that had worked out, what everybody is sort of discussing on Reddit today, and Dade replaces High at mid laner. Is that even a good move for Cloud9? Is that something that would make them a better team?
I mean, High is, as people have said, so integral, and we've said on the show that he's their biggest strength and their biggest weakness. It would be interesting to see. We saw at All-Stars Cloud9 without High, and they had Link, who's, especially now, arguably a weak player.
Certainly a passive player.
And they did pretty good at All-Stars. So, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I still think, me as a Cloud9 fan, at least I would rather see just the original 5.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up, I think, the two major themes of this offseason are Koreans leaving and going other places, and the importance that places, or the way it challenges whether like being best friends and communication and those kind of relationships is really the most important thing and teams need to be paying attention to. Travis, this would have obviously changed the sort of core chemistry that a team like Cloud9 has by keeping their roster together, and something that a lot of people have touted as one of their main reasons for their success is that they get along super well and they're all best friends. How do you sort of measure the impact or the potential impact of bringing in a player who doesn't really speak English and is new to the team and sort of blows up all of the chemistry for a squad like that?
Again, I'm hesitant to discuss like
it's just
High going to
theoretical.
leaving because whenever we have these like theoretical discussions, people start to think like, oh, this was going to happen. In a theoretical world where it could have happened, because obviously C9 seems to be the only team that's not changing. I think this would have been a huge mistake. Like High is the core communication on that team. Talking to Link after All Stars and talking to some of the Cloud9 guys. Like whenever Link was on that team at All Stars, like apparently there was just not much communication at all. And part of that is because Link is a little bit quieter of a player. But I remember doing interviews with them where they said that they started to look better after they moved away from High or from Link shot calling, and Meteos kind of took over this stuff. Dade doesn't speak English, to my knowledge, and so it just would have been a bad idea to replace your captain and shot caller with somebody who doesn't speak English. I don't know who else on that team could have done a good job of stepping up. I think it would have just been a step back.
It sounds like it's certainly a potential. This is sort of Cloud9 system in general, but a high-risk, potentially high-reward move where you would give up like the team captain in exchange for, I think most people would say, a more talented player, at least on paper, and hope that the team would gel around and figure it out and be stronger coming out the other side. Teams are making this risk all over, though. There's rumors. We know 2 Koreans have joined Millennium now, and there's a questionable amount of English there. It's the first time European team has picked up Koreans where Horo and Ryu are moving to join them, and that's just an expansion team. That's going to be tough to integrate. Dignitas is rumored to be picking up a Korean player and a Chinese player. Again, unclear what level of English those players would have once we figure that out. LMQ is going to have to figure out how to integrate is Zhao Weizhao into potentially Chinese, potentially not Chinese-speaking players. CLG struggled with Seraph and figuring that out. Teams seem right now to be saying communication doesn't matter. Maybe we can just figure it out on talent alone. The kind of Royal Club got as far as they did. Maybe we don't need that at all.
Yeah, I still think communication is important, and people like Skara, as well as Link, just had another blog where he said communication is important. And I think while in-game communication is important, one thing that Link especially noted is that out-of-game communication is also like very important, and being able to live with these people. And we've seen with Crepo and with Tabs, people saying that out-of-game is just as important as in-game, and like how just living with these people as somebody who you can not even hold the conversation about TV, like what are you going to have to talk to these people about?
Right. Although if I were Link right now, I would be spending all of my time saying, I speak English, communication is important. I speak English, communication is important, because otherwise I get replaced and then I don't have a job. But yeah, I think this is a weird thing about the gaming house culture in general and sort of the college age, kind of perception of how life is supposed to work, that these they're not just coworkers, they're roommates and housemates. Altic is sleeping, at the bottom of the stairwell on probably an air mattress, or I don't know, just a pillow on the floor or whatever. This is a really weird. You see the Curse house tour. People are sleeping in bathrooms and closets, and
Together.
camping in the backyards, sharing beds. This is a really weird scenario. It's hard in that world to probably overestimate the impact of actually getting along with each other, because you don't have a car and you don't really like these. You have no way to get away. If you don't like each other, you're just stuck with each other, like in a very close way for 6 months, 8 months over the next time.
And Tabs epitomized that by saying he was lonely. He was in this house full of 6 or 5, 7 people, and he was lonely.
Lonely. Yeah, I don't know how you're lonely in that kind of situation. But Travis, so when you're bringing in people from different cultures, we can use Curse like we talked about a little last week. How do you bridge the gap? How do you make somebody feel at home? This is for a lot of these guys, their first time living away from home. That's hard on kids who normally go off to college or go off to camp or all that kind of thing. How do you bring a team together in a world where maybe the most important other people in the organization are other players? You don't have a strong managerial presence.
Every time I enter the U.S. and I go through customs, there's a video playing, and it just says welcome, and by a bunch of different types of Americans, and there's a bald eagle and an American flag. I think if they just had that playing all the time in these gaming houses, it would really help out with some of the international players. No, I don't know. It's very strange because, it's kind of almost it is a business, right? And at the end of the day, you want your coworkers to get along with you, okay? And whenever you go in and you want to be able to jam with them well in these meetings or whatever, and everybody's just very different. Part of it is that pro players, I think, in general are, if we're going to go along stereotypes, maybe it's not fair, but I do talk to a lot of pro players, a lot of people who are just kind of standoffish. All of us have watched the Game Cribs or the Chasing the Cup episodes where you see a pro player who's just sitting in the background going like this the entire time. And I think, as ridiculous as it is watching C9 being that's so troll, man, that's so troll, you want to get some Chipotle, those guys are working together, they get along, they're talking to each other, and they're not just sitting there playing Hearthstone in a corner. I'm just kidding, but it's just a very important thing. I think a key thing for these teams whenever they're trying out a player from here on out should be that each of the players should talk to the person who's coming in, like an interview. That's how a lot of startups work. That's how Riot works. Even as a lot of people, you get interviewed by people that are going to be on your team that you're going to be working with. I think it's important for people to talk and say how will I get along, and then all the players sort of get a sense of what it'll look like.
So I think interviews is a really interesting idea, and it brings up sort of what we talked about a little last week. As TSM Santorin seems more and more confirmed, this is a decision that I assume was made with basically no input from the team. Maybe Bjergsen duo-queued a little with him. There were at least rumors to that effect. But your team was never there, and then suddenly the new player is just picked. That seems like such a risky strategy in a world where you're going to be living with this guy, and communication is really important. This kind of teamwork, buddy-buddy, interrelational stuff is. How do you sort of explain decisions like that at the same time? Where every team is going round and round about how important communication is. TSM seeming to say there doesn't matter all that much.
They've kind of done this quite a few times with Glebe. But it's actually surprising because I don't think they've scrimmed ever at all because everybody was on vacation and Loco was in Korea and Lesboy's still in Korea. So how did they get up at weird times? I think it was almost a little bit of a desperation move by TSM because it's this is the best person we could get. And so they just try to scoop them up as fast as possible. That's my opinion. I don't know. There's no logic there, or there's no sources
Evidence.
there or anything.
I don't think that it's a desperation move. I think that time and time again TSM has been lucky, or maybe not even lucky, but they just are good at picking top tier talent and having it work out for them. If you're Reginald, right, and you look and you're okay, I replaced Chaos for a week with Wild Turtle and got a significantly better player, or everybody questioned bringing in Lustboy at the last second to replace Glebe. Glebe being the outlier, of course, to this rule. And then Lustboy came in and it was great. I think you're just very, very confident in your ability to just be like, hey, that's a good player. I think he's the best. I'm great at picking talent. I'll just grab him and bring him in. And so, and I mean, obviously amazing, I guess maybe doesn't fit that either. But I do think that Reginald is very, very confident in his ability to pick out talent and pull them in. And especially probably now with Locodoco's input. So I think that they're just bold in that way.
I do agree with that. I do think they have like a confidence factor to them. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see where Dignitas goes with their Korean and Chinese imports that have been rumored by OD himself, basically.
Yes, he's spreading rumors. Right. I mean, I think the scene really is wide open right now. You know, we were sort of putting together a list beforehand of like, what do we actually know at this point? And you still don't know a lot. CLG, LMQ, Dignitas. You know, there are major teams in North America, in Europe. Alliance, who knows what's going on there? Rumored lots of changes. Reckles leaving Fnatic, that's kind of, or maybe, I don't know, is, you know, like kind of leaves potentially a big hole in their lineup strategically and stuff. This offseason is still really early on, and if anything, I think we're seeing teams are willing to blow it up and start over, which I actually think is good. I think we've historically, especially in NA, had too much hesitance to change players out when they've been underperforming, and that if we're going to assert that NA is a region that can compete with Korea and other things, or that it should be, then when you are not good enough for that, you have to make changes and you have to get better. And we're seeing teams do so. Who knows what CLG will field next year? Hopefully it's a way for them and, you know, for the scene, a way better lineup than they had before with double lift at mid. That's my personal opinion, but, you know, something like that.
I think bring the Rain Man back.
The Rain Man.
I mean, North America loves to recycle
well,
talent.
and Timo is 1-0 in the LCS, undefeated. So I think that speaks well for Rain Man. But you know, just in general, the offseason is really wide open, and right now we know a lot more about what we don't know than what we actually know, right? Like we know a lot more. Zion has left, Crepo has left. You know, Reckles wants out. Tab seems to be gone. We know a lot more about where people aren't than where people are. In terms of where people did end up, though. Coast with a surprising move to bring in 2 Europeans to replace their 2 Korean ringers that they brought in for the promotion series. So Jesus leaving SK and Impaler leaving Rocket and heading to the NA region now, potentially disqualifying or sort of giving up their pre-qualified spot and having to qualify again through ranked 5s. That's certainly a move that surprised me. It seems like a big move. Where do you see Coast now? Does this make them a better squad than what they were?
I mean, Coast as an organization has been really weird, especially in probably the last 6 to 8 months. They've been trying really, really hard to get back into the LCS, and they've had, you know, they've brought over Koreans, they've brought over Europeans before, and then but they don't get like A-list players. I think that's the biggest problem. I see Jesus and Impaler, and I don't see like star people. I mean, given that the talent or the bar is so low in North America, I think they are actually probably one of the favorites for the expansion tournament. But
Travis, are they the 9th or 10th best team in NA at this point?
I have no idea. Like, who knows what's going to happen with these European guys? I did love the tweet that popped up on my feed. I forget who it was that tweeted, but he was like, if you count me, Coast has had 6 different mid laners this year, which is very, very, very funny. I just don't know what to think of Coast. Like, they just sort of, in my mind, here, actually, I'll just say, like, I don't even tend to think too much about Coast, like, this year, or haven't, because even though I know they're consistently a contender, they're just off in the sidelines. They're changing too often to keep up that I just, like, I lose interest in them because I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, something ridiculous. Who knows what's happening next? Like,
yeah,
I have no idea.
Yeah, I think who knows what's happening next is the theme of this offseason in general. Who knows? Well, this next week could have a lot. We're running these roster rumor columns every day. Alex Penn is writing those for us. They're definitely the best way to catch up on every rumor that you might have missed on Reddit or Twitter or something else. Travis has his finger up. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I feel like you're doing the Hunter Lee, like,
yeah, we're wrapping
run
this
into the ending.
Yeah.
All I just want to say is I'm going to be at PAX Australia this weekend where they're doing Australian regional finals. It's a really big deal. People who are looking to watch some League of Legends during the break should catch that because I think it'll be pretty fun. community down here is very passionate, and there's some really cool teams and really cool players. So tune in for that.
Yeah, so check Travis at PAX. Go up and say hi. He loves to meet people. He'll sign things. He'll take photos, give you hugs, anything else. He's a really friendly guy. And otherwise, we'll see you next week right here on the Roundtable.